I can't do that.
But you must.
This kind of thing could change the world.
I know.
But I can't ethically do that.
Listen here. You take your orders from me.
Fine, I'll do it. I'll show them how to build a root app.
Now that's what I'm talking about.
Hi there, Adam here. Today, continuing on with our series from last time, we're going to make a very, very basic root app. Now, before we start with the root app, we have to ask, what is root? Actually, some people out there who don't know. So, basically, you have your Android system permissions, the permissions that you accept every time you get an Android app. Well, what root does is it allows you to bypass those permissions. Basically, instead of being stuck inside of this little box right here, you issue a command that lets you jump outside of that box and elevate your permissions. You become a super user. You see, Linux has many layers of permissions, just like real life. When you execute the su, super user, -c, that's the same as the Linux sudo command that we're all familiar with from running Linux. For example, hey, make me a sandwich.
No!
Sudo, make me a sandwich. Yeah. But now, elevating your permissions above what you're allowed to do normally can be kind of dangerous. If you don't know exactly what you're doing, it can be pretty bad. Sudo, punch me in the face. No, Control-C, Control-C! Now, I just want to put this out here as a disclaimer. I know Java a lot more than I know Android. So, in my mind, I tend to separate the two. You have your Java over here, and you have your Android over here. And basically, you work with the Android, and you move it into Java. Now, the cool thing about Java is that you can take applications that were written for a desktop and pull the code right out and put them right into your Android application. Now, it's only possible at a certain level, so I'm going to show you exactly what I mean. We'll get to that, all right? Also, I want to say that I can't teach you everything there is about Java. Java is a huge, complex language, all right? I can give you the basic tools that'll get you started. In order to follow along with today's episode, you're going to need the SDK setup, Eclipse setup, and a Diet Coke. Everyone knows developers run on caffeine. Alright, so let's pick up where we left off last time and add some functionality to that button. So here's the button. And we can see up here, this button is known in the XML file as button1. And we can see that id/button1. So let's start by opening up our source folder. And here we can see the XDA SDK activity that was generated as a part of the new project. This is the default code that's inserted into every single project. Here are our imports, and these are what turns it into an Android app, basically. This package, we defined that before, and this statement right here defines this as part of our package, our XDA SDK package. Now here's our class definition. This says, hey, I'm an XDA SDK activity, and it extends the activity that we imported earlier. Now, I'm not going to get into what an activity is or anything like that. You can read about that on Android.com. Now, this is our default function in just about every application for Android. I think pretty much every application. You're going to see this on Create. And what this does is it basically reinitializes the Android application in the same state that it was. Like all the buttons will be the same and all that. If you background the application, this foregrounds it basically. Alright? So the next thing is to set the content view. And the content view, you'll notice here, is r.layout.main. And the R stands for res. The layout is the layout folder, and the main is the main XML. So basically what we're doing is we're setting the view as our default Android view that we were talking about before. So the first thing that we need to do is to define that button in code. So what we'll do is we'll call a find view by ID, and we'll reference r.id.button1. And in order to tell it that it's a button, because right now when you find by ID, you're just importing a generic object. So what we need to do is we need to cast that as a button. And we need to assign that to something that we can talk about in the Java code. So we'll do final button button1 equals. And of course, it's not a complete Java statement unless you put a semicolon at the end. You'll notice that we have red underlines under the button. And what we can do is we can hover over that in the Eclipse IDE and then import button. Now you'll notice that we have a yellow underline here, and that says that button 1 is not used. Let's change this really quick. This should be a lowercase. Now what we need to do is we need to put some code behind it. Let's make this button do something. So we'll say button1 dot set on click listener, and you can see here Java has, or well, Eclipse has put an autocomplete on it. So we can do that and just hit enter to select it. Now for our on-click listener, we need to put something inside of it, so we'll say new view dot on click listener, and there we go. So hitting enter automatically fills in a lot of the stuff that we need to do. We've created a method inside of a button on click method that's inside of a different method that's inside of a class. You'll find a lot of times in object-oriented programming that you'll have a value inside of a method, inside of a class, inside of another class, and it just keeps on going and going and going. That's an object-oriented language where you can create something that's an object and manipulate little parts of that object one at a time. And you end up with a whole that is portable. We've imported the view and the button. Now these imports are ginormous code banks. I mean, it's like a whole library that we've just imported that defines how a button works and how a view works. We were automatically given this code right here. We've declared our button right here, and we've started actually programming the button here. Now, all we have now is we've got to add some code in. And we'll start by pulling something from our code base. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, what's a code base? Well, for me, my code base, I keep that all online. I'm an open source programmer, and I'm sure you are too. Now, one of the advantages of being an open source programmer is that we can grab code from other open source programmers. For example, my casual project has a very useful class called shell. And what we're going to do is copy that shell class into a new Java class inside of our project. We'll call this shell. Now, I'm going to take a minute and get this functioning properly for this project in particular. However, it's very important to note, if you're taking code from someone else, then you should always make sure that you give them credit. So let's use that shell class. Now the shell class takes in an array of strings. Each part of the array is a different parameter that we're going to send to a shell. So let's do it. So we need a string array. String command called an array equals, and now we'll start the actual commands. And we'll just issue the ls command for now. And we'll put a second parameter as slash. So what we're going to do is do an ls command on the root folder of Android. Now we need to bring in the shell class. Now we'll call that shell send shell command, and we will pass in the argument that we defined up here. And with that, we've actually made our button do something. It's issuing a shell command, but we won't be able to tell just yet because it's not doing anything to the graphical user interface. So let's make it do something to the graphical user interface. Alright, so now what we'll do is we will assign that shell command to a variable. And now outside of our event listener, we'll create a new method. So what we've done here is we've created a new method called setNewText in TextView. It's a public method and it returns nothing at all, as you can see from this void keyword. And it takes a string value called text, which should be lowercase. Inside of this setNewText in TextView, we want to create a new text view. And we'll set the text for the text view. And finally, we'll set the content view. Which will activate the text view on screen. So now that we've created this method, we need to make this button call that method. So we'll do set new text in text view string, and we want to put the text string into it. So there we go. If all works well, we should just be able to hit the play button, and we should get the ls command, the output from that, directly displayed on our screen inside of the device. So you ready to see if this worked? And now if we hit this button, there we have it. And as you can see, we've got a list of all the files on the root folder of our device. So now let's add some root functionality to that. You may know that you can't access the /data folder itself. Under normal circumstances, if you drop to a terminal, you can type ls/data and nothing will happen. It'll give you an error. So what we're going to do is we're going to elevate up our permissions and do a listing of that folder. So we'll add in su, comma, -c, and now because we're passing a command into the super user, what we need to do is put this all as one command. It's a bit tricky to explain, but it's just the way the SU works. Is you pass in commands into it as though it were a terminal, and then it will execute them. but that only works when you use the -c parameter. So now if we hit play now, we should be able to just bring it right up. Now you'll notice that this time when we run it, it comes up with super user request. And we can allow that, and there you have it. There's the contents of our data folder. So we got a lot done today. We made a root app that upon button press, it executes a shell command and puts that text from the shell command into a variable and then displays that variable in a new text view that we created in our Android app. I've put up an open source repository at http://xda-adk.googlecode.com, and you can go onto that website and you can click the source tab and you can get directions right from the website as to how to import this project that we've created here into Eclipse. Now make sure that you stay tuned, because in preparation for working with the ADK for Android, we'll be working with the Arduino next. Don't forget to add me to your circles on Google+, and you can find me in the forums. I'm AdamOutler for XDA TV. So now watch what happens when I hit this button. Nothing at all.